would not pass by my house without turning in a few yards and say hello, Mr. Senoga and the family and Edith.
And I always think of him as being like a light. Wherever he went, he was beautiful, a beautiful soul.
There's something about looking in his face and seeing that glorious smile and feeling love just penetrate my being.
He was very powerful, yet very noble, and very gentle and warm.
And the way he talks with the people, he talks in a very polite way, and he knows what you mean in your heart.
What a beautiful soul. He glowed. His smile showed so much love, and his eyes just sparkled. He glowed. He had a halo around him. I wish you could have known him.
Enoch Olinga, my father, was a loving, caring person with a very big heart, great sense of humor, dedicated, and very happy.
You cannot hear, "Are you happy?" without hearing Enoch Olinga, and you cannot hear it and think of him without smiling, and it's like sunshine bursting through the clouds.
This wonderful smile that just disarmed anybody that came in contact with him. And the most wonderful hug in the world. He had the capacity to bear hug you into paradise.
His spirit was so strong, his love was so strong, his gentleness, his intelligence, everything about him had such quality to it that it revolutionized my own inner concept of what color meant or didn't mean, what spirit meant or didn't mean, what love meant.
He was such a loving person, unified person. I'm telling you, and the love of Mr. Olinga was, I'm telling you, beyond, had no boundaries. I'm telling you, and I miss him.
I remember not exactly the words that he used, but more the feeling that I had. And I walked away thinking, this must have been what it was like to have met a disciple.
We all love you, Papa Olinga. We all miss you, yes we do.
Deep in the heart of Africa, Enoch Olinga was born on June 24, 1926, in a tiny village among the Teso tribe in northeastern Uganda. Even from his early years, the people of Tiling noticed his qualities of love and kindness.
He was born at Tiling, and he grew in Tiling, and also went to the school in Mora Primary, where we are together. So he was a very, very friendly young man. He was a quiet boy and loving. And he used to love especially children. Where he comes across where he visits, he wants to sit down and talk to the children and encourage them and ask them questions and laugh with them.
His father was teaching in Abango. He was brought when he was just young, about 2 feet. He used to be a playful child. He used to be a boy who liked me. He helped me. It takes time for me, really, to forget Olinga.
After attending high school in Mbale district, Enoch Olinga served as a translator in the British Army Education Corps during World War II. In 1946, Mr. Olinga married his first wife, Eunice, and began to work for the Ugandan government as an economist and translator of 6 languages.
By the early 1950s, Enoch Olinga's life entered a dark, uncertain period. It was during this time that he met a group of Persian and European pioneer families that would introduce him to a new world embracing faith. Mr. Ali Nakjavani, one of the first pioneers to Africa, recalls that priceless time of the birth of the Baha'i faith in Uganda.
I first met Mr. Olinga in 1950. And he was a young man working for one of the government offices in Kampala. And his encounter with the faith and with the Baha'is was such that we could see that he was keenly interested and attracted to the faith. When Mr. and Mrs. Banani, the hand of the cause, and his wife, at that time he was not a hand of the cause, came on pilgrimage here in the days of Shoghi Effendi, the little group that we had in Kampala wrote a letter to the Guardian and asked him to pray for a meeting that we were going to have in Kampala. And Shoghi Effendi assured the Bananas that he would be praying for that meeting.
We had this meeting called on the Sunday afternoon, and the idea was that Ali would, as usual, be giving his talk, and I would be at the door welcoming people in and so forth, and I would have a copy of the Will and Testament, and that if anybody showed as though they wanted to become Baha'i, on that occasion, I would take them away and talk to them. Only one did. And I walked, he was a young man, and I took him in the bedroom, and we talked about the Guardian. I told him about my experiences with the Guardian when I'd been there with him for 5 weeks. I talked to him about the Will and Testament and about the Covenant. And he said that he would therefore go away that evening and write his formal letter of declaration. That was Enoch Olinga.
So I have always thought that Mr. Olinga was the fruit of a prayer offered by Shoghi Effendi. I definitely could see a transformation in Mr. Olinga. For example, he was a very heavy drinker. And when he became a Baha'i and understood that that drinking was prohibited in the faith, he stopped it without any question. For example, the laws about obligatory prayer and fasting, he accepted readily without any question. He wanted to read everything. And it would be no exaggeration to say that he probably read every single English book that we had about the faith in our own library. He himself told me that he had always been very timid and weak-willed. But we could see that after he became a Baha'i, he was a lion-hearted champion of the cause.
Enoch Olinga's love for Baha'u'llah continued to flower. The rapid enrollment of new Baha'is in Uganda brought great joy to Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith. Within 8 months, the first local spiritual assembly of Kampala was formed, and within 15 months, the pioneers and first indigenous believers assisted in teaching over 200 women and men, representing no less than 16 tribes.
Mr. Aziz Yazdi, early pioneer to Kenya, speaks about the first Ugandan conference in 1953.
Baha'u'llah had referred to the African and the people of the eye because of their color. And the time had come for all these people in Africa to come within the fold of Baha'u'llah. In 1953 was the inauguration of the 10-year crusade, the most important crusade in the history of the faith, because the object was the conquering of every country, every territory in the world.
In an unprecedented act of faith, Enoch Olinga was among those who immediately responded to the Guardian's 10-year crusade call for pioneers. Mrs. Violet Nakchivani, pioneer daughter of Mr. Banani, describes their historic journey across the continent.
Enoch offered to go to West Africa, and so Ali and I offered to take him in our car. We had him and 2 other Africans. Of these 3, 2 of them were Knights of Baha'u'llah. One opened Congo-Brazzaville. In those days it was known as French Congo. And Enoch opened the British Cameroons. Halfway up this jungle, we had problem with the car and we were stranded in a village. And Enoch, after prayers and consultation, it was decided that Enoch was the one who had to walk. And we did not see him until 36 hours later when we were able to join him. He told us what happened the first night when he had contracted dysentery and he was quite ill and feverish and very frightened and depressed. And when he went to bed, he thought to himself, what am I doing here in the middle of this frightful jungle and unfamiliar people? And if they kill me, nobody will know, and I have left my family and my home. Why am I doing it? It was a real test of his life. And he said he fell asleep with that thought, and he had a dream. He dreamt of the beloved guardian. He said he dreamt that he was fallen in mud, and Shoghi Effendi came to him and lifted him up and took him in his arms and told him, I am well pleased with you. And he said he woke up and he felt so refreshed and renewed that he said, my immediate thought was that, oh my beloved, I am ready to do this for you every day of my life. This was really the rebirth of Enoch Olinga. His real regeneration, rebirth in the faith was on this trip and on that night when he had this very, very wonderful dream. He was very ill. All of us were very ill after this when we came out. But then he was not the same Enoch. He had so much more energy and joy and hope and so on. And he was able to send his cable from Cameroon to tell Shoghi Effendi of his arrival on the last day of the Holy Year, on the 15th of October, 1953.
Knight of Baha'u'llah, Enoch Olinga honored and respected the indigenous peoples and cultures of Western Africa, devoid of any attitudes of superiority. Even though he faced tribalism and other animosities, Mr. Olinga remained firm and loyal to the cause of God, deeply affecting those he met.
When Enoch Olinga was passing through Cameroon to go to Nigeria, he passed through my village with Manu Division, and he had to stop for a night. So he stopped his car in front of my grandfather's home. My grandfather was Solomon Tanyi. And that same night, my grandfather had a dream that somebody great is in front of his home. And on getting up in the morning, he realized that there was a vehicle in front of his home and somebody sleeping inside. And so when Enoch Olinga got up, my grandfather went and greeted him, and they introduced themselves, and my grandfather invited him into his home. And Enoch Olinga introduced to him the faith, and that's how he became a Baha'i.
Mr. Olinga's wife and children eventually joined him. However, the strain of being away from home became too great for her. They divorced, and she returned to Uganda, leaving the children with their father.
During the period of 1957 to 1963 was very, very important to me as a child, and the relationship between me and my father grew up here very strongly. It's this time that I learned quite a lot of prayers and took up fasting, something I'd learned by observing my father do, and we're always fascinated as children, seeing him getting up so early in the morning to prepare breakfast for his fasting. And he never stopped us from joining him. So we really liked that aspect of it. And it's also during this period that I always looked forward to going on traveling, teaching trips with him, especially over the weekends. I was certain that he will never leave me behind if he went on a teaching trip at the weekend. And I learned quite a lot, not only the Baha'i faith, but it was like an adventure which gradually instilled in me those principles of the Baha'i faith I copied from him.
It was a great experience being the son of the late Enoch Olinga. He showed us a lot of love and caring, wanted us to know about the faith and love Baha'u'llah. And I think we tried to show him what embraced the faith when he was still here.
For almost 10 years, Mr. Enoch Olinga lived in British Cameroon and was instrumental in establishing the faith there and in Nigeria and Ghana by travel teaching, deepening, and inspiring new believers to travel, teach, and pioneer. He also served as chairman of the first Regional Assembly of Northwest Africa.
What he accomplished, Shoghi Effendi says, has never been equal in the history of mankind. To be able to have left his home in Uganda and established the faith in many countries in West Africa and some countries in Central Africa because of his love for the faith and his great sacrifice and humility.
In 1957, Enoch Olinga was the first black African given the priceless blessing of making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and be in the presence of Shoghi Effendi. Mr. Bonaventure Wafula recalls Mr. Olinga's meeting with the Guardian.
Hand of the cause, when he was speaking, when I was listening, I could cry, I could weep, tears could come from my eyes. And the love he had to the beloved Guardian, when he was mentioning and so forth, when he was talking about the beloved Guardian, I cannot even say in words. And the love the beloved Guardian had for Africa, and for the African people, I cannot even express how Mr. Olinga was expressing when he was being told by the beloved Guardian. He mentioned countries, almost every country and the people in those countries, all the tribes, and how important it is that these tribes receive the message of Baha'u'llah.
Hand of the Cause of God, Amatul Baha Ruhia Khanum recalls the beloved Guardian Shoghi Effendi's love and appreciation of Enoch Olinga.
Shoghi Effendi was very proud of Enoch, who was taught the Baha'i faith by Mr. Banani and Ali Naqshbandi in Africa in their home. And then he came at the Western Pilgrim House. He was having dinner with the Baha'i pilgrims from the West. And he said, I have given Mr. Olinga the title of Abu Futu, the father of victories, because he was so distinguished in his service of the Baha'i faith. He loved Enoch. Enoch was a wonderful man.
On October 2nd, 1957, while visiting Uganda after his pilgrimage, Mr. Olinga received a cablegram from the beloved Guardian announcing his elevation to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. Mr. Olinga had been a Baha'i for only 5 years. Mrs. Violette Nachavani recalls Enoch Olinga's reaction.
In one of the last messages of the beloved Guardian, when he appointed the last contingent of the 8 hands of the cause, 3 of them were in the continent of Africa. Bill Sears, John Robarts, and Enoch Olinga. My father was always the only one there, and he received the messages of Shoghi Effendi and he would convey it to others. So Enoch was visiting Uganda from West Africa. So my father called him to our home and gave him the cable of the Beloved Guardian. When he read this, after a little while, he prostrated himself full on the floor with his arms stretched and legs stretched, and he just remained like that for a while. And then I remembered I had seen this scene only once before. The first year we arrived in Uganda, through a friend who was not a Baha'i, we were invited to a very solemn ceremony in the palace of the king of the Baganda. At this ceremony, all the chiefs, head chiefs, from all over the district had come, and they would pay their homage to their king. And every one of them, as they approached the king, this is the way they saluted him and paid their homage. They would fall on the ground fully with their arms stretched and head on the ground. And Enoch did this spontaneously when he received this cable of the Beloved Guardian. His spontaneous reaction was to fall flat on the ground, put his head down. And it was as if he was in the presence of Shoghi Effendi, his king.
Mrs. Javadut Kadem, the widow of Hand of the Cause Zerula Kadem, describes the unique station of a Hand of the Cause of God.
The Hand of the Cause, to me, they were destined. A few of the Hand of the Cause that from time of Abdul Baha, Abdul Baha referred to them, referred to the family. To me, they were chosen by Baha'u'llah and by Abdul Baha and the Beloved Guardian from the time probably even before they were born. Hand of the Cause of God is a person strong in the faith, devotion to Baha'u'llah, and with a sacrificial element, or the whole being has to be a sacrifice for the faith. Made people happy, made people confirm, and made people understanding that the faith of God is for service and happiness. It's a joyful thing. They're a joyful being, because in this sacrifice, they satisfy their heart and soul. Mr. Olinga was from Africa, and Mr. Khadim was from Iran, but they mostly they met in the Holy Land together. You know, the culture doesn't mean anything. Any culture, the devotion is devotion. And the Hands of God, they had all these qualities, whether from east or the west or any part of the country. And Mr. Olinga, he was a very cheerful man. He was a very simple man. He was a loving man. When you looked at him, you said, oh my God, what a creation. This was Olinga.
Mrs. Marguerite Sears, former pioneer to Africa and widow of Hand of the Cause William Sears, shares her cherished memories of Enoch Olinga and her dear husband.
My husband, William Sears, and Enoch Olinga were both Hands of the Cause appointed in Africa. And they were very, very happy that they were assigned to the continent of Africa, even though neither one of them were able to stay there very much longer after they were appointed, unfortunately, because they had to travel all over the world during the 10-year crusade. Wherever they went, they brought humor with them, and also pathos, because they were able to wring the hearts with their talks, and they always lifted them as well with their humor. It was always a joy to hear them.
In 1958, the laying of the foundation stone of the Mother Temple of Africa was held in Kampala, Uganda, with several Hands of the Cause and thousands of believers present. Enoch Olinga spoke and translated for this sacred event, as well as the African Teaching Conference that followed.
Before leaving Western Africa for Kenya, Mr. Olinga married Elizabeth from British Cameroon, creating an intertribal marriage. Their partnership continued to be a shining example through all their travels.
When he came to Nairobi, he first came on his own. It was towards the end of 1963 or early 1964. Then his wife Elizabeth and their youngest son Lenny joined him in Nairobi. So for the first time I saw Elizabeth, his wife. She was such an elegant looking lady and very radiant. I think she was just the right partner for Mr. Olinga. They made such a good match, such a lovely couple. My favorite story of Mr. Olinga goes back to many, many years ago in Nairobi when we were having a national convention in a hall in Nairobi. I have a little girl who was born in Nairobi. Her name is Soveida, which means the pupil of the eye. Because she was born in that continent, this is a befitting name for her. She was about 3 years old, and I was in the convention hall. When something happened, I noticed that a friend, that's how I perceived it, was unkind to her. That offended me. So I took the hand of my daughter and was leaving the convention hall. Mr. Olinga noticed it, and he came after me. He grabbed my arm and asked me to sit down and listen to something that he had to say. He held my hand in his hand and said, "I understand you have an expression in Persian which says you must thicken your skin." He looked deeply in my eye and said, "My dear, that's what you need to do. You have to develop a thick skin in order to be able to tolerate the things that you see in this world which appear to be injustices and inequities, and they may offend you. But once you develop this thick skin, you don't let anything get under your skin, and you remain a happy, radiant soul."
Hand of the Cause of God, Amatul Baha, Ruhia Khanum lovingly recalls her experiences with Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga.
Enoch was a very intelligent man, educated man, and had this delightful African sense of humor, and he was a very, very pleasant person to be with. Me and I were great personal friends. For the Baha'i faith, which at that time had spread all over the world, and even the minor islands, let alone the nations and major islands, and we had so many Baha'is of so many different backgrounds. It was wonderful that Enoch Olinga was one of the hands of the cause. Enoch was appointed by Shoghi Effendi. He came here, he saw Shoghi Effendi. After the passing of the guardian, he worked with his fellow hands. We had our meetings here because the hands of the cause, after the passing of Shoghi Effendi, until we succeeded in electing the Universal House of Justice, ran the cause of God and its affairs.
After the election of the first Universal House of Justice in 1963, Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, had the priceless bounty of opening the first Baha'i World Congress in London, England.
Friends, here is the text of the cablegram which was sent to the entire Baha'i world by the hands of the Cause of God. Occasion worldwide celebrations, most great jubilee, commemorating centenary Baha'u'llah thrown his sovereignty, with hearts overflowing gratitude. To jubilation, entire Baha'i world, victorious completion, beloved guardians' unique crusade, now added humble gratitude, profound thanksgiving, followers Baha'u'llah for erection, Universal House Justice. August body to whom all believers must turn, whose destiny is to guide unfoldment his embryonic world order through administrative institutions prescribed by Baha'u'llah, elaborated by Abdul Baha, laboriously erected by Shoghi Effendi, and ensure early dawn, golden age phase, when the word of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. Beloved friends, the prophets and seers of old long to witness the glories of this day and to participate in this matchless, this peerless occasion. Without the slightest doubt, however, these holy souls and denizens of still much higher and loftier spiritual worlds are rejoicing with us today, are watching with delight what we are doing, guiding and inspiring us. At this juncture, beloved friends, I would urge you all to strive to banish every conceivable detracting thought which may race through your minds, and submerge yourselves in the sea of spiritual communion and experience. Friends, the beloved of our hearts, our beloved Shoghi Effendi, is in our midst now. It is a tremendous joy and relief to know that he is with us, pouring into our minds, soothing and strengthening us with his thoughts. And if we gaze more keenly, friends, we shall see our vision expanding further and further. May the blessings of Baha'u'llah be with us all and enable us to fully appreciate the greatness of his station and of this day, so that we may, when we return to our respective homes and countries, make use of the dynamic forces which have been released during this time. Friends, Allahu Akbar.
The New Zealand Baha'i community was overjoyed at being given the bounty of welcoming Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga, on 2 occasions in 1958 and in 1970. During his 9-day visit in 1958, he met with over 4,000 people in schools, public meetings, and special gatherings with the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of the land. One of the highlights was a visit to Rotorua, where Guide Ranji conducted his party through the thermal and sacred wonderlands, followed by a special invitation to visit the meeting house. Julie Raika, the grandniece of Guide Ranji, recently shared those precious memories with Enoch Olinga's daughter, Grace Olinga Manis.
Welcome to Hinamahi. Hinamahi was opened in 1927 and it was built for Guide Rangi by her grandfather. After looking at the photos, your father obviously was one of those many very important or VIP visitors that have come into the house, along with Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip and many others, and we'll go through the photo album later. But before we do that, I want to put on the cloak that your dad, the cloak that Guide Rangi actually put on your father when he was here 40 years ago. Yeah. And my mother, who has since passed on into that world, that one eventually we all will, she was an expert at traditional weaving. It has been remodeled so that all the feathers are the same. It's just, yeah, it's gone into panels, and we've actually had 2 cloaks made out of it. So I'm going to dress you as your dad was dressed, wearing this cloak, holding this mere, okay, and the taiaha. This taiaha belonged to Gairangi's father. Okay, and that's a picture of him up in the photo. And I'm just wondering now whether you're feeling the same values within those things that your dad may have felt.
It's a very lovely feeling. I never dreamt I'd be here today doing this. Yeah, it's a real honor.
It's my pleasure, Grace, to be a part of it too.
To complete the historic meeting, Julie and Grace recreated the scene in front of the consecrated meeting house. Manu and Margaret Alai, longtime pioneers to New Zealand, escorted Grace through the sacred grounds just as they had 40 years ago with her father, Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga.
Why do you feel your father, Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, felt a need to come to New Zealand and, in his own words, to especially bring a proclamation of who Baha'u'llah is to the Māori people of this land, the indigenous people?
I don't really know if I can give that a full answer, but I know my father had the Pacific in his heart. He loved the Pacific. And I know that he prayed that one day I would pioneer here, especially Samoa. And I believe, I don't know, he felt close to the Maori people, though he hadn't met them, and basically because they were the indigenous people of this country. He will be remembered for his big heart. He had a big heart. He will be remembered for his beautiful smile. He had a great sense of humor, and he enjoyed a good joke. He had a contagious laugh. He just yeah, he will be remembered for his generosity. I've heard people talk of him, of his kindness, of his love, and of his giving, and he was a giving person. There were 8 of us, 8 children that Dad had, but in Uganda, I think my father has educated, I don't know how many hundreds of children. He's been responsible for sending them to school, and people, they call him Papa Olinga.
On saying goodbye, the Baha'is of New Zealand realized the true meaning of love, humility, and devotion to Baha'u'llah, demonstrated by Enoch Olinga, the father of victories.
As a Hand of the Cause of God, Mr. Olinga continued to travel around the world for 20 years, inspiring the hearts on every continent and many islands.
In Samoa, we were with all our Samoan friends at the airport waiting for his plane to come in. They had built a beautiful ark of flowers, and it said, "Welcome Enochi." That's the way they say Enoch in their language. And as we waited, we started thinking about, Enoch, and we started to sing, Enoch Olinga, Enoch Olinga, Enoch Olinga, Hand of the Cause. And all the Samoans joined in, and we worked on it for about 5 minutes. We had a whole song with the first 2 sections and a bridge, and then repeating back to the beginning. Gina helped supply words, and when he arrived, everybody sang that, and they were so overjoyed to see him, and he was so overjoyed he had tears in his eyes too.
One of my wonderful recollections of Enoch Olinga was when we were in Suva, and he was speaking at a meeting that was scheduled in a little village just outside Suva. And we had rented this very big hall, and as we arrived, the room was just packed with people. And all Enoch did was just walk into the room, and he smiled. He never said a word. And the next thing we knew, the people just stood up like they were one body, and they went wild. They screamed and they shouted and they cheered, and we just couldn't believe it. I actually found I had tears running down my face. I'm even moved now. It was such a moving experience.
When we heard of his coming, it was for the first time Hand of the Cause was visiting Trinidad and Tobago. It generated a lot of happiness, enthusiasm. Everybody was looking forward to see him. He was like very kind, very happy person in all occasions, never stopped laughing. Brought that happiness also generated to the Baha'i community. He was like a fire of love, could pay attention to everyone, old, young, children, make them happy. And with that great faith, when he recited the tablet of Ahmad, almost everybody felt it, that faith which he has in his heart.
Well, when I was in Haiti, and we did have an extremely delicate and difficult situation, the patience he showed, the love he showed, a little bit of humor too, and all, and trying to help us to resolve the situation. Perhaps, do you know, I guess I've seen that with most of our hands, because I've had the good fortune of meeting a number of the hands of the cause of God. And in difficult times, their love for the Guardian, their love for Baha'u'llah, gave them something that we don't usually seem to have. And they were able to, I think all of them showed forth this love, this wisdom in protecting the cause and helping us.
Well, I think my most happy experience as I pioneered was the visit I had with Enoch Olinga on a Easter weekend in Haiti, a Catholic country. We didn't know how many people would come or if any would come at all, but I had gone through the village all day and invited the people to come. And much to my surprise, they showed earlier than usual. They came before the time of the meeting, and by the time the meeting was to start, I had nearly 40 people there, which was really exciting. I had to translate him because the person who usually translates was not there. And I had to translate British English mentally to American English to French. And it was really fun because the people in the audience, knowing me, knew that I didn't know French very well, and so they helped translate, which was really fun and had audience participation, many questions, a really lovely evening. And Enoch Olinga was just, you know, so gracious and wonderful, and it was such a blessing. And all I have to say is when you put your foot forward to help the cause of Baha'u'llah, the Supreme Concourse comes to your assistance. You don't need to doubt it. It is a guarantee.
I first met Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, in 1976 in the American Virgin Islands. I had been reading day and night Baha'u'llah's words, Abdu'l-Baha's words, so many of concepts of which I'd have to look up in the dictionary. One concept of which was radiant acquiescence, that I understood hands of the cause of God were endowed spiritually with great spiritual knowledge, spiritual energy, and I thought this is a great chance for me to ask this hand of the cause of God, what is, say something about radiant acquiescence, which he did after first rolling his eyes to the heavens saying, "You got to help me with this one." But he told a story which I'll convey the essence here, that he had been at a public meeting, had talked about the Baha'i faith, the media, the press had been there, and a good time had been held by all but this one representative of the press who came toward him with great anger and agitation. He was furious about everything he'd heard, and Mr. Olinga said, "I felt myself getting upset. This guy was right in my face and just so upset." So I realized at that moment, this is an angel that God has sent to me to test me. this is an angel. This man is an angel to test me. He said, I immediately recognized him as a gift to test me, and I started beaming with joy. He said, I was so happy. I reached out and gave him a wonderful warm hug. He said the rest of the evening he was so puzzled. He would just look at me, and his mouth would be open, his eyes, but he was silent the rest of the evening. I was very happy, and I think that's the story I can tell you about radiant acquiescence.
During the time he was there, he also gave a talk at one of the large hotels. One of the final questions that came from the audience, I'll always remember because my background in communications. The question was, what's the most important thing in the family relationship? And he said, communication, communication, communication. And he just indicated that if you don't have good communication in a relationship, you won't have unity. And obviously that means come together with consultation at all times.
In addition to visiting individual communities, Enoch Olinga represented the Universal House of Justice at several intercontinental conferences, National Spiritual Assembly formations, and meeting heads of state in Asia, Europe, Central and South America, and Africa.
In February of 1977, my husband and I were privileged to attend an international conference, International Baha'i Conference, that was held in Mérida in the Yucatan. The conference was very exciting because there were people from so many backgrounds. There were so many Mayan Indians, for example. And of course, that's right in the heart of Mayan country. So it was an exciting and wonderful place to be at the time. And then more exciting than anything was the fact that Enoch Olinga came. He'd been in Brazil, and he came up from there to be at this conference. And he and Paul Haney were two of the leading Baha'is, hands of the cause, who were at the conference and more or less conducted it and spoke frequently and all. And it was a very enchanting time for all of us there.
My closest contact with Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, and his wife, Elizabeth, was at the international conference held in Mexico, Mérida, Mexico. That was one of the 8 international conferences designated by the Universal House of Justice for 1976 and 1977. I was planning on remaining in Latin America for a short while after the conference, and Mr. and Mrs. Olinga were also planning to journey to some of the countries, and we were able to arrange to have me go with them. And we went to Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Panama, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. Mr. Olinga had a wonderful personality. He was joyful, always inspiring, and his wife was very gracious and queenly. What impressed me so much was that whenever he would talk at any place, he would always introduce his wife and have her say something, and he would introduce me too and have me say a few words. It was being like in the presence of 2 angels.
We had a conference in Nairobi, and then there was over 1,800 friends was attended from different parts of the world, and especially from Iran. And then whenever this conference or other conferences was holding, he was introducing, always calling the pioneers to come up on stage and introducing each and every one of them to the audience. And he was asking, you can say a few words to the friends, and you explain your experience about your pioneering, about your service to Baha'u'llah, so will be the cause of the encouragement to the others. Whenever he met the friends, he was in a very jubilant atmosphere, and he was very happy, and the way he was talking, that makes everybody happy. And this is a character that is we Baha'is we must do. That is, we believe in Baha'u'llah. We have got the blessing and bounty of Baha'u'llah in our heart, in our soul. So we must be every moment of life in this world to be happy and make happy the others.
During that time of the Palermo Journey Conference, it was, as you know, the centenary of Baha'u'llah's journey to Akka. And we actually went along the journey, and Dr. Jerry and Mr. Sears would tell us what took place in the various ports and what have you. As we arrived, I met Hand of the Cause Enoch Olinga and his wife Elizabeth, who we became instant lovers, instantly, because Elizabeth was such a glow. She was such a warm human being. She pulled off her head tie and she came over to me. She said, "Here, I want you to wear this." It was a little red and gold head tie. She said, "You wear this because you are an African sister." Mr. Sears and Mr. Olinga encouraged me to pioneer. Well, at the time I had a daughter. I'd lost my husband and I was raising this daughter alone. And they encouraged me to pioneer. Well, I couldn't see how I could ever pioneer because here I'm struggling, working and what have you. And they said, "Don't worry, you will pioneer." I had a chance to pioneer, of course, to Liberia, West Africa. Mr. Olinga was always encouraging. He kept in touch. Elizabeth continuously kept in touch with me, wanting to know how we're doing. The one thing I remember about Mr. Olinga was his love, his humility, and his talk always about the Holy Spirit. Even though we are separated, that the Holy Spirit, the bonds and ties of the soul, the spiritual ties are always there. This was some saying of the masters. And he said that no matter what takes place in this world, we are children of God and that he loves us. We must strive to become nearer and closer at all times to Baha'u'llah. We must bring him close to us and keep him with us.
Eventually, the Olinga family returned to live in his native village of Tiling, where he built a home for the family. This refuge away from his many commitments may well have assisted him in overcoming the enormous difficulties he experienced and challenges yet to face him.
As Enoch Olinga is the hand of the cause who came from Tiling, Kobuin, Kumi district, his impact in the faith is very great. When he went to West Africa, he came back and made a lot of gatherings and a lot of conferences in Tiling, whereby enrollment of the Baha'is was very great. He was eager to call children together and chat with them. He wanted children to be around him, and that's why he even started, initiated a school, a Sunday school in Tiling.
I got to know Hand of the Cause, Mr. Olinga, whom we adopted the name as Hand of the Cause, Papa Olinga, when I was still a very, very young child of about 8 years. We got so attracted to Papa Olinga because of the love and the unity he had with our family. In fact, we never got to know that they are not related till very late. They were so united that we had to call him Papa Olinga, the brother of Papa. And you know, the love he had for the community where I grew from was so unique that it has been my prayer always that such unity and love develops among all the communities and the Baha'is.
الله حقا در سالهای حدود 1972 جناب اولینگا به تهران تشریف آوردند.
In the early 1970s, Honorable Olinga visited Iran, the birthplace of Baha'u'llah. It was in Tehran. I was about 16 years old and remember vividly the gathering was like a fountain of people flowing around him to the point that there was no room for a pin to drop. His talks were close to our hearts and unforgettable because he foretold of future events that we have now seen with our own eyes. I remember wherever he traveled, there were many friends circling around him, and by saying Allah Abha and greetings would express their utmost joy.
After Hand of the Cause of God Enoch Olinga's visit to Iran, the friends in Europe in 1970 had the joy of seeing him and Elizabeth at the House of Worship. In Germany, where he said a prayer in his native language.
The Baha'is of Canada and the United States were deeply blessed by the visit of Hand of the Cause Enoch Olinga, from the east to the west coast, to the deep south, and finally north to the Mother Temple of the West.
I grew up in a very segregated southern community. I didn't go to school with anyone of color. Not even high school or college. So my experience was very limited. But when I met Enoch Olinga, he opened up a new world to me of what color did or didn't mean, what spirit meant, what love meant. He was such a beautiful example of what I think God was talking about when he said, I made man in my own image. He embodied to me what spirituality was, his loving, gentle, intellectual abilities radiated to everyone. He was very impressive. I think the South now still vibrates from what he had to say and what his presence did to that community. There are a lot of Baha'is there who are still very active and have very vivid memories of his visit.
I knew that he was a tribal person and that I'm a tribal person, and I knew that he would know things that could benefit me knowing. I wanted a validation of our traditional religious beliefs, that they were from the Creator, that they were in truth. I said, we believe that there have been several manifestations of God who have appeared here in the Americas to our ancestors, and he smiled. He said, yes, that's true. He said, but a lot of people don't understand this. There's been more than 20,000 of these manifestations of God. And I just looked at him and I was like, and he was off, looking kind of like he was seeing something in another world, and he was just relating this to me. And then he came back and he looked at me and he smiled, and he just leaned forward like that, and he put his forehead against my forehead, and we just stood there for a long time. I mean, it could have been an eternity. It was really a long time. And he just looked at me and he said, he said, we'll meet again.
It's always been of particular interest to me how Enoch Olinga and Louis Gregory related to each other in terms of their station and their missions in life. The founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, in his teachings uses as one of the cornerstones of his revelation the equality of all human beings. In the United States in particular, where racism had actually become institutionalized, the Baha'is have always felt that the elimination of prejudices and the equality of the races had to be one of the first areas that we concentrated on in teaching the Baha'i faith. And to that end, one of the most significant examples was Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, had a particular mission for Louis Gregory in developing certain aspects of the teachings of Baha'u'llah to the Western world, particularly the early American community. And of course, as we know, Louis Gregory, after his passing,
his spiritual station was elevated to that of Hand of the Cause of God, which is a very significant and honored station to hold. As I grew up in the faith, and as time went on, and the guardian, Shoghi Effendi, became the head of the faith and began to appoint other hands of the cause, these particular souls who were his right and left hand, as it were. During that early period of his administration, opening up the whole continent of Africa to the faith. And there arose amongst the early believers in Africa a young man, a very humble background, whose name was Enoch Olinga. And a man who became so inspired, so committed to the principles of the Baha'i faith and the spirit of his own development with God, became such a giant in the teaching field in Africa that Shoghi Effendi gave him the rank of Hand of the Cause of God.
On my first trip to the House of Worship from Florida, I met Enoch Olinga. He was such a powerful man. And even though he didn't speak to me directly, what he said was to all the people who live close to the land and who are of color: be strong, be real, and keep up your hope. Pray daily. Pray, 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 and your answers will come through prayer.
Beloved friends, I am very happy indeed to be here this evening, and I do hope that you too are happy. Are you happy? Yes. Are you really happy? Thank you very much indeed. The Baha'is are very fortunate in that they are alive in these days and have been enabled by Baha'u'llah himself to recognize him who is the Lord of this day. And that's why Baha'is should be happy always. It is not possible, the beloved guardian explained, it is not possible for anyone in the world to be happy without God. We must know God first. We must know God. And when we know him, then we are expected to love him with all our hearts. No wonder Baha'u'llah himself, the supreme manifestation of God, has said that the first duty prescribed upon the people of the world, only one duty, and that is to recognize the manifestation of God for their day. The beloved guardian said, anyone in Africa living in a small village and unable to read or write, but believes that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for today, that Baha'i in that African village occupies a very high station, a very high position in the eyes of God. He said, of all the gifts which God has given mankind, the greatest, including love, wisdom, knowledge, and other merciful qualities, the greatest is the gift of teaching the Baha'i faith. There are many Baha'is in the world. They are not aware of Baha'u'llah. That's find them. That's the first thing to know. And when we are sincere, then we shall be led to them. He said, first, believe in Baha'u'llah and surrender your will in favor of the divine will. Love Baha'u'llah with all your heart. Trust in him and have confidence in him, and go out believing that he is with you and he will guide you to the right people.
In 1976, the Olingas returned to their homeland in Uganda for the joyous occasion of the marriage of his eldest son, George, and pioneer Farouk Esfani. It was a day of uniting Persian and African cultures in the fragrant gardens of the Baha'i Temple of Kampala. Abdul Baha encouraged intermarriage, saying, "There is no greater means to bring about affection between the whites and the blacks than the influence of the Word of God." Likewise, marriage between these two races will wholly destroy and eradicate the root of enmity. The vibrant beating of the African drums and the festive dancing only compounded the joy that the Olingas and friends felt on this blessed day surrounding the Mother Temple of Africa. On the following day, the entire entourage left for the 6-hour journey to Tiling. The people of Teso greeted the wedding party along the way to join in the celebration. Enoch Olinga welcomed the couple to repeat the wedding ceremony in his native village. He tenderly extended his warmth, love, and happiness to every family member, friends, and his beloved wife, Elizabeth. The great joy brought to the Olinga family would soon give way to more difficult days ahead.
In 1977, Hand of the Cause of God Enoch Olinga and his wife Elizabeth returned to Uganda to be with the friends and protect the Baha'i properties during the growing crisis throughout the land. Mr. Wafula recalls Enoch Olinga's meeting with the Guardian, foreshadowing the events to come.
Uganda, Kampala being the spiritual heart of Africa, how one day the spiritual heart of Africa will be attacked and be due to political power struggle. This will result into Uganda suffering. When the heart of a human being, he said, is attacked, Mr. Olinga, what happens? Then what happens? The body collapses. No way. So that is what would happen that time. When the spiritual heart of Africa, the friends will be shaken and scatter, and many of them will disappear. Mr. Olinga, when the friends scatter like that, will they come back, or this kind of thing? But then the beloved Guardian said, so when summer comes, what happens to the trees, the leaves of the trees? They get dry, and then they drop. And after dropping, and when spring comes, autumn, spring comes, what happens? They start budding, and then they become green as before. The beloved Guardian said that is what would happen to the Baha'is. Those Baha'is who will scatter, who will disappear, and so on, later on they will come back, and the faith will grow again, will grow from strength to strength.
The faith was banned in Uganda. I was the first to go to Mr. Olinga's home, knelt beside his bed and woke him up. He was resting in the late afternoon. And I told him that, Mr. Olinga, the faith has been banned in Uganda. He turned on the other side and started crying. And he said, go in the sitting room, I'll get dressed, I'll come and talk to you, and we'll decide what we can do. So I went in the sitting room, and he came. He was by then composed, and he said, where do we start? So we decided by starting to go and see Aunt Claire, who was a pioneer and was living alone at a school. So we went to Aunt Claire's home with Mr. Olinga, and we said, Aunt Claire, do you know what has happened? She said, oh, no, it isn't the Baha'i faith. It is these small sects that have been banned. And Mr. Olinga said, Aunt Claire, it is also the Baha'i faith. And Claire refused to listen. He said, no, 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 it's all right. Then Mr. Olinga got hold of my hand and said, Edith, let's go, and Claire will be all right. After that, we came and walked around the temple, and we saw that everything was quiet, and he took me to my home. I brought in this story because some time before Mr. Olinga's death, he called me by name 3 times, and he said, Edith, 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 as you knelt beside my bed to tell me about the burning of the faith, this is how you will kneel beside my dead body. And I said, Mr. Olinga, why do you say that? Maybe I'll die before you do. And he repeated it 3 times. And it was only after I had been killed that we rushed to his home, and I was kneeling where his body was, and I was crying. This is when I remembered what he had told me. And I have always wondered how he knew how it was going to be.
Throughout the 2 years the Baha'i faith was banned during the Civil War, the Friends suffered terribly, but remained obedient to the edict. Enoch Olinga personally cared for the temple grounds with his own hands. One night, a fierce artillery battle raged around the Temple Hill in Kampala, and Enoch Olinga spent the whole night praying. In the morning, the government had been defeated, and the temple was safe.
In April 1979, even though chaos, violence, and looting continued in the capital, the ban was lifted, allowing the Friends to gather once again. Enoch Olinga joyously reopened the Baha'i temple for public worship.
And in the temple, Mr. Olinga loved to organize the music. We had a group of youth who could sing, and he would just mobilize youth and start to conduct singing himself in the temple, so that next morning he sees that the music in the temple is proper.
The Universal House of Justice appointed an interim committee to oversee the Baha'i activities until the National Spiritual Assembly could once again be elected.
You may well expect that after the banning of the faith was lifted in 1979 with the fall of Idi Amin, how grateful we were to have the opportunity to, come together again as a Baha'i community. But I was very, very surprised, and shocked to hear that I had been nominated to be among the 5 members of the administrative committee. I was a very young woman at the time. But I remember that Mr. Olinga was really a very warm and encouraging individual. We didn't realize it then, but he was such very supportive. He did not make me, for instance, feel that being a woman and a young woman at that I was inadequate. I always felt confident, and he made me feel that I could serve on the administrative committee. So this young administrative committee had the privilege of only something like 5 months of the guidance of the hand of the cause. And then he was not there anymore. We felt like, little chicks which had been left on their own. And it was not a very easy time. With the help of Baha'u'llah, we did manage to, organize the funeral of Mr. Olinga, but also to go on to organize the convention which established the National Spiritual Assembly.
In September, a family reunion was planned to celebrate. Enoch was so happy during these last precious days.
My fondest memory is when we were all together as a family in the evenings. We usually got together and sang songs, and it was really a joyous moment. Those are the memories I like to remember most of the time. Because Enoch Olinga always spoke about being devoted to the faith of Baha'u'llah. And he stressed many times and said you have to be devoted to Baha'u'llah to not only teach the faith but to live the life.
My father, Enoch Olinga, was a man with a very big heart. He was very loving, kind, gentle, and very dedicated to the faith and to the family. And our home was always open to everybody. And in the days when things were really, really bad in Uganda during the Civil War and everybody was scared, Baha'is and non-Baha'is, one of the things people said who were not even Baha'is was being in the home of Enoch Olinga would be the place to be safe. And it's really sad to see that that was the place that tragically took the lives of my father and my family, the person who was really the most peaceful and peace-loving individual.
Mr. Olinga was always willing and ready to help others. In fact, that Sunday, when he was killed with his family, we were here on the temple grounds after the temple service. And we had a meeting with the friends who were coming from up country. And Mr. Olinga was so happy and joyous. He got up, he sang, he danced, and called all of us to join him.
He sacrificed by traveling all over the world. He was always away from his family. While we ourselves, a family is a great tie. I can't leave my children, I can't. His home was open to everybody. He loved everybody. He was a friend of the youth, and he could converse with the people of all races, all classes. He had conversation for all people of classes. And when you are in his presence, you think that I am the only one who is most beloved. And when another comes, I'm going to Mr. Olinga, he is my father. And I remember the day when he was killed. Everybody came crying, oh, my father, my father, my father. One evening, Mr. Ule went to the hand of the cause at Kitante. Hand of the cause told him to stay for supper. He said, no, it isn't safe to walk, to travel here at night. So immediately he left. A boy had someone shaking the gate. He looked out in the window. He saw 4 armed people entering in, and he hid. Immediately, he heard the shootings. This is how he said. And then he heard shouting. Everybody in the house was shouting. When the shouting stopped, it means that everybody in the house was shot dead. So at dawning, that boy went to the police and reported that everybody in Mr. Olinga's house have been shot dead. And he had a taxi and came up to the hill of the Baha'i temple. He found Mr. Ule, who was by then a counselor. Mr. Ule drove to Edith's house, Edith Senoga, who is now a counselor. Then they came to my house, Catherine. When they told me the story, my heart helped me to prevent it, not to receive the news, even if the ears could hear. They told me to dress up, and we went. So we went on the way, weeping, very sorrowful, very disturbed. When I found Mr. Olinga lying on the floor, I thought there's still something we can do to rescue his life. I lifted up his head, and I found insects in his mouth. There I lost my mind. There were armed soldiers round about. I started pointing at them, that's still killing innocent people. Don't think that those bullets and guns will bring peace in the world. It is religion which will bring peace in the world, and this is what this man have been teaching.
I had been in that house, and I see it clearly in my mind's eye that his family was taken first and that he was running towards the commotion, and all of his thoughts were for his family, and that his last thoughts were for his family. And I know that if they had been coming for him, and if he had known they were coming for him, he would have opened his arms and gone out and embraced them as brothers. He would have joyfully and gladly given his life.
The message of the passing away of the hand of the cause of God found us while we were in Nairobi. That morning, we had a shopping list he had given us, and we had bought about half the amount of things he required. And we decided to take those back to the Baha'i Center and then continue. It was at this time that Mr. Wafula handed me a letter, and I got the letter and put it in the dashboard of the car. And he insisted that I read it. My reaction to that was it that urgent that I should go through it at that moment, or I could do it later? He asked me to read it immediately. And so I did. And in this letter, the news of the death of my father was indicated, and the members of the family, and of course the condolence of the friends in Kenya. My reaction to this was, first there was quite a bit of silence, and Farouk looked at me and didn't know what to do. But then I told Mr. Wafula, I'll just go to town for a drive and come back. He wasn't very pleased with that idea. So Mr. Peter Vuye requested that if I had to go to town, he will accompany me. So we went together, and I didn't have much or anything to do in town. I just wanted some time to drive around and reflect on what steps to take next. So on our return back, I told Farouk we should just pack up and then leave for Uganda, which we did. And that night, we spent the night in Kisumu. We met the Kenyan friends, Mr. and Mrs. Obora, and I was able to communicate to Mr. Alinak Javani that night, indicating to him our plans. At the border the next morning, as the case is often done of checking vehicles, we were subjected to this, but we told the custom officials we were not in really good shape to be able to do that, and if they could just excuse us. And it's at that point we saw the headlines of the newspaper about the killing of Mr. Enoch Olinga, and we showed them what had taken place, and they felt so sorry and just waved us to go immediately and continue with the journey. And on arrival to Kampala, and we found all these Baha'is gathered at his home, it's when it actually dawned to us that they were no longer with us.
I went to Lesotho as a pioneer, and whilst in Lesotho that I met Peter, my husband. We got married in Lesotho, and we had our first child, Nabil, in the capital city, Maseru. And from Maseru, we sort of home front pioneered to a smaller place called Mafeking. That's where Peter got a job teaching. And it was while we were in Mafeking, and I was 6 months pregnant with our second son, Buddy. Peter was at school, and he came home, and I wondered, why is he coming home? It's not lunchtime. And yeah, he sat me down, and and very gently, very lovingly broke the news to me. And it's funny because half an hour later, there was a car came from Maseru, which is the capital city. And it was from the Ugandan embassy that obviously got the news, and they knew I was in Mafeking, and it sent the Ugandan High Commissioner himself came to Mafeking to find us. And fortunately, I'd already heard the news through Peter, which was, I think, a blessing.
With grief-stricken hearts announce tragic news, brutal murder, dearly loved, greatly admired, hand cause of God, Enoch Olinga, by unknown gunmen, courtyard, his Kampala home. His wife Elizabeth and 3 children, Badi, Lenny, and Tahira, had also fallen innocent victims this cruel act. His radiant spirit, his unwavering faith, his all-embracing love, his leonine audacity in the teaching field, his titles, Knight of Baha'u'llah, Father of Victories conferred by the beloved guardian, all combine to distinguish him as preeminent member his race in annals of the faith on the African continent, the Universal House of Justice.
The death of my family was devastating to us. Words could never describe the effect the loss of our dear ones had to our family. It brought to, for me, it brought to the surface the reality that our life on this earth is a fleeting moment, and how important it is to do what we are here to do. And of course, that is to spiritualize our lives, to teach the faith, because in reality, nothing else really matters in the end. It's who we are, what we've done in this world, and that's all we'll be taking with us. And the death of my father, my young brothers and mother, really brought that to the surface for me and for my siblings. And I know that from the other world, he is looking out for us and praying for us and the grandchildren and for the friends. And even though he's not here, his spirit is with us. And he will always be missed tremendously.
The news of Enoch Olinga and members of his family's tragic death came as such an unexpected shock to the Baha'i World Center, and especially to the Universal House of Justice members. You know, the Universal House of Justice is the highest administrative institution of the Baha'i faith, where the Baha'is all over the world look for their love and guidance. So we were just in shock. Accompanying this tragedy a week before was the razing of the Bab's home in Shiraz. The Bab, of course, being the prophet who announced the coming of Baha'u'llah. So we have the twin prophets of the Bab and Baha'u'llah in the Baha'i faith. His sacred home had been totally destroyed by what was also going on at that time, the Islamic Revolution, where the Baha'is were being picked up, imprisoned, martyred, tortured. Ali Nachivani, a member of the Universal House of Justice, said, at that time, the Baha'i World Center was a community in mourning.
It made me very sad when we heard about the death of Mr. Olinga. But at the same time, you know, he died in very tragic and difficult circumstances, but it really seemed to me to be reflective of his life as well, that he had given to the faith completely. He was devoted and was a tireless teacher of the faith, and in that same way he steadfastly was at his post teaching, carrying out the instructions and the directives of the House of Justice, and You know, like many other Baha'is and many of the other martyrs, he ultimately gave his life. It reminds me of one of the other very early African believers, Eduardo Vieira, who was considered the first African martyr. He was from Guinea-Bissau. And it's amazing that we're still so close to that time period that we probably really, I think, don't fully appreciate the legacy that they have left for us in blazing the trail and opening up those countries to the faith, which now we see so many burgeoning Baha'i communities today.
His death came unexpectedly and tragically and pointlessly. It was a great shock to everyone in the Baha'i community around the world, I'm sure. I think to me it pointed up the fact that of the great need for the revelation of Baha'u'llah to eradicate the things that lead to such acts, because they don't stand alone and by themselves, but as something that comes from a system that is definitely defective. We can grieve for his passing, and yet we know his life was spent in serving the cause he loved, and that he is in a better place. We have to stay and work here on this earthly plane.
I think I never felt more sad than at the death of Enoch Olinga. Just to see his face in my mind now gives me strength and love. He was love personified. He gave us, he wrote out in his own handwriting a beautiful prayer that he said Abdu'l-Baha it was a prayer of Abdu'l-Baha that had been given to him when he was in the Holy Land. And it was one that he always asked his wife to say for him when he was traveling in Africa. And all I remember of it now is that he said he would go over mountains and so forth to teach the faith, and that he asked God to give him tests. But please, O God, in the hour of test, give me strength. And when he died, when we knew that his life had come to such a tragic end, that prayer came to my mind that, oh God, you were with him in the hour of test, I know.
Don't think, personally, I can forget Olinga. I don't think. No. Because the love, it's beyond my, I can't even give explanation about how he loved me, everybody. Not to me only, but whoever Olinga embraced, he would not feel it. I don't know. Unless that person, I've never been to World Center, but I think Mr. Olinga became my World Center, sorry.
Enoch Olinga's murder was recited to me by telephone on a telegram. I succumbed to physical, emotional grief, but went out later in the streets of the Caribbean island where I was living, amongst the people of color there. I'm remembering how Mr. Olinga had been one person in Uganda and had discovered Baha'u'llah's revelation, and how empowered and transformed and how huge his spirit had become to encompass the peoples of the world and beyond. I'm walking down the sidewalk, and every face of color that was passing me, I'm looking and saying, are you Enoch Olinga? I'm thinking, every single person has to be able to hear about the revelation of Baha'u'llah. We don't know what God knows about what they have to offer. God knew about Enoch Olinga and somehow guided him to the path. And I'm looking to think, all these people, I have to tell them, is this one another Enoch Olinga? Are you Enoch Olinga? Are you Enoch Olinga?
That stays with me today. Thank you, God, because the desire to teach, the desire to be open to the spirit of teaching so that I can find or be in the company of one whose soul, whose spirit, whose history, whose energy, whose life could become as Enoch Olinga.
One of the last holidays we spent with Papa Olinga and Mama Elizabeth was in Kampala home. And one day he shared with us one of the mystical dream of his, which he had a night before. He called us in the sitting room and he told us that he dreamed he ascended to the next world. And he was so surprised seeing Bach, Einstein, and Beethoven. They were so busy. They were working so hard and composing music. So he asked them, "What are you doing?" They said, "The same thing we have been doing in the earth." He was surprised. And he said, "But I thought when we come to the next world, we are going to rest. And there is no more work." Beethoven laughed and said, "In fact, you need to work harder in the next world. And there is no rest." And then Papa Olinga asked, "But why? Why is it like that?" He said, "Because we are supposed to inspire the people on the earth. So be ready to work harder." Papa Olinga was so beautifully telling us, bringing to our attention, and he said, "Do you understand what does that mean?" We looked, and several times he repeated, and he said, "You know, I thought that I'm going to be resting. You know, children, I'm very tired. I have been traveling. I have been teaching the faith. I am tired. And I thought I will go and rest." And then he broke to laughter and said, "It seems there is no rest here. And we need to..." And then he suddenly said, changed his voice, and he said, "Well, if that is the wish of Baha'u'llah, then let's work hard. Pray for me."
It is through tests and difficulties that the rich flower of faith emerges. Today, Baha'u'llah's faith is shining forth once again in Uganda, the jewel of Africa.
The Baha'i community has a good working relationship with the government today. George Olinga shares some of the exciting advancements.
In Uganda, we still find so much in our work with the Baha'i faith, and a lot of reference being put back onto the hand of the cause, Mr. Olinga. Dealing with the various government officials, the mention of the Baha'i faith, the officials will immediately go back and try to relate their relationship with the hand of the cause when he was alive. And this has greatly helped us a lot in our public relations activities in Uganda. Whatever ministry you went to, you will find somebody who knew him very closely as friends, or they just heard about him. So it has helped us a lot, and we find his spirit is really assisting the progress of the faith in this country.
The Baha'is participated in writing the new constitution, which created 9 member councils to guide each city. It also guarantees equal rights for women and universal education for children.
We have been observing the methods the government is using quite closely related to Baha'i principles, and this has been a source of encouragement to the believers themselves, feeling that what they've been doing all this time seems to be moving towards the right direction. In the area of equality between men and women, we've been able to observe the government putting into place a law which guarantees certain positions for women in decision-making bodies of the local councils, the district councils, and in parliament. And it's interesting to note that in Uganda we have a woman vice president among the various women that we have, and recently we have a woman minister responsible for ethics and integrity, and she recently invited the Baha'is to participate in a workshop to assist her and give her some guidance on how she could go ahead bringing back moral values.
The Baha'i National Committee for the Advancement of Women is very active and strongly supports the annual Women's Day Parade.
Dear visitors, you're welcome. 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 You are welcome to Dealing. Dear visitors, you're welcome. You are welcome to Dealing. Dealing is our land. Dealing, a Baha'i land.
The two schools, that is the Louis Gregory Memorial Schools in Odusai and Tiling, have been doing very well. The year before, the Tiling School did the best in the whole district, and it was a big surprise to the government official that a rural school was able to come out first compared to the schools in the town. And this really pleased us. And this in part was due to the fact that there was quite a lot of input by the Baha'is. There was special in-house training for the teachers during the holidays so that they see teaching as a service to humanity. The progress of the faith in Uganda, one can look from the time of the renovation of the Baha'i House of Worship. Since then, new carpets have been put into place, and we have been graced with the presence of caretakers to assist in the maintenance of these properties. And this has greatly enhanced the beauty of the grounds, and it has become a great source of attracting the non-believers to come and visit and thereby make inquiries about the Baha'i faith. The institute process is doing really very well in Uganda. It's based in part on the Ruhi programs of South America, and we've adapted quite a bit of that into our process here in Uganda. And you can begin to see personal transformation of some of the individual believers.
Tuli amatondo, genyanjemwe, tuli ebingonja, nyanja mpangwe, ije tukatanise, omukulonda omumwe, nugwe muhanda gw'amagara gawe nanye.
There is good work amongst the youth and the children's classes, which gives me confidence in the future. That to the extent to which we get deepened youth and knowledgeable children, we are laying a foundation for the course to move perhaps even faster because Uganda has to arise to its leadership role in the continent. Because the House of Justice has reminded us time and again that the continent of Africa has a destiny, but that destiny depends on Uganda arising first. And I should probably even hasten to say, Kampala needs to take the lead. That's where the Mother Temple is, and certainly if they arise, and then the country will arise, and if the country arises, then the continent will arise, as it was in the past, that Uganda did contribute to this spread of the coast in the continent. Pioneers arose from this country. They went to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Congo Brazzaville, and Enoch Olinga himself went to West Africa. And I think that is the kind of challenge Uganda is faced with, and it is capable of arising with that.
A special systematic Enoch Olinga teaching project has been initiated by the National Spiritual Assembly and the Continental Board of Counselors. The Baha'is in eastern Uganda invite travel teachers to consult about their community development.
One of those teachings that Baha'u'llah said is a solution to our problem is the equality between men and women. When women are appointed and put into position of decision making, war will cease.
The grandchildren of Enoch Olinga come from 4 intercultural marriages of African, Persian, American, and New Zealand heritages, demonstrating to the world the oneness of humanity.
In a way, Papa Olinga has never left us, because as we've grown up, we've been told a lot of stories about him. Whatever we do, people remind us whether he would have wanted us to do it that way or not. And in that way, it like streamlines your life.
My job of being a Baha'i child is to teach other non-Baha'i children about the Baha'i faith. And I'm proud of being a grandchild of Mr. Enoch Olinga.
The impact of Enoch Olinga's radiant life continues to set a high standard for the Baha'is of Africa.
The life of the late hand of the cause, Enoch Olinga, need not to be described. It can only be experienced. Being with him was a transformation. And it did not matter for how long you were with the late hand of the cause. It didn't matter. Anybody who came in contact with him created a new life altogether. And I think we are basically, any Baha'i you see really in Uganda, ready to serve the faith, ready to do all these things, somehow part of his encouragement is from the late hand of the cause of God, Enoch Olinga. So therefore, we owe gratitude to Baha'u'llah that such a soul lived in our community, and we were able to get a glimpse of what this life is like.
You know, with reading now more about the life of Mr. Olinga, you look back and you realize how lucky we were, some of us, to have lived so closely with him and to have had the benefit of his love, his joy. You know, he inspired that sense of joy in everybody. And also the feeling that each one of us was very special and very much loved. And I think in every individual's life, that's what we need, to be, as individuals, to be made to feel that we are capable, that we are deserving of that kind of love. So I guess if I was to say what difference being close to Mr. Olinga made to me as an individual, it was to you know, begin to love yourself and to be confident as an individual, as a woman, as an African, that the faith of Baha'u'llah is ours, you know, and that we should, you know, take charge, you know, of this beautiful and wonderful faith. Mr. Olinga was very, very loving, and he didn't have to know you. He just showered a lot of love, and that was very special.
When Enoch Olinga became a Baha'i, I saw a great change in his life. First, he stopped drinking. We were going together to drink. He stopped taking alcohol. Then he was. I lost his company in the evening because he was going to the Baha'i meetings to help teaching, and then I started following him. He was bringing Baha'i books in the office. When I read some Christian subject and answered the question of the Baha'is, then I got a ray of light and started attending the Baha'is meeting until I was convinced that Baha'u'llah was the promised one of all ages. After becoming a Baha'i, of course, I see a great change in my life, and I love all people. We used to be tribalists in Uganda, and we hated the white Asians, and but now we know how to accept Baha'u'llah, and I love all mankind.
What a fantastic opportunity this is, to be sitting here in the home where Enoch Olinga declared, right here. And Enoch Olinga was the one who inspired all of us. Enoch did the most wonderfully inspiring things. We all know that Enoch, when he became a Baha'i here, we know that he went out to his home area. He taught his mother, his father, his sister, his brother, the teacher, the policeman, everybody in his area. And that was the first Baha'i mass conversion in the world. I mean, this is history, and this is fantastic Baha'i history. But not only that is a miracle, then we all know how Enoch inspired us. He then went on out to, as a Knight of Baha'u'llah, to Cameroon, and then teaching in Cameroon. At the end of his first year, he had 13 Baha'is, and the Guardian urged them, please, there were 5 of the virgin territories which were not fulfilled, and he said, please, Enoch. And 5 of Enoch's new spiritual children went out and filled those 5 goals. So Enoch now then, 5 of his spiritual children came out and became Knights of Baha'u'llah. Enoch was one of us. He came from Uganda. Anybody here can take this as the most inspiring, wonderful Baha'i story. And this is Enoch. When he went teaching with the Aborigines in Australia, you know that lovely story of when the rain came and they had this little shelter for Enoch, and all the rest of the people were getting wet. Enoch moved out into the rain and got wet like everybody else, and they just loved him. This was Enoch. Enoch was sensitive. Enoch was loving. Enoch was inspiring. And this is a great treasure for all of us here in Africa.
I remember one time Mr. Olinga had been abroad, and he came back and he said, you know, now is the time for us to have a book exhibition at the Uganda Museum, and I want you to execute it, to get it to start, to make it happen. And I said, oh, Mr. Olinga, I would very much like to help do that, but where are the books? He said, never mind, you'll find them. And then he said, you know, you must always work as if you are the only one in the world to do what Baha'u'llah wants you to do. And taking that into my heart, I've always thought, never mind if you have too much on your shoulders, never mind, act as if you're the only one to bring this to the attention of others. And I think that's the way he affected me.
Actually, many people have asked me, for heaven's sakes, why did you go to South Africa? Of all places in the world, why go there? And of course, the answer is that's where the faith was needed probably more than anywhere else in the world at that particular time. It was a long, slow process because we were not able to teach openly. We had to quietly go only to the black communities. We weren't supposed to teach the white people for that period of time. The blacks were so open to the faith. You could walk in, knock on any African door and say, can we come in and pray? And it was wide open. By all means, come. We would love to pray with you. And the faith was extremely precious because that's the way it was introduced, and the blacks felt how precious it was. And then, of course, it went on for many, many years that way, knowing when we knew that eventually it was going to change. But there is one incident concerning Enoch Olinga, which I think was very significant, and that is the fact that in 1968 there was a young Afrikaner, about 22 years of age, who came to Haifa during the International Convention, and he there met John Robards, who was from his hometown, and yet they had never met. And John was so excited and pleased to meet an Afrikaner from his hometown of Mafeking that he introduced him immediately to Enoch Olinga, who was standing right next to him. And Enoch, being black, African, and Don Fouché, being a white Afrikaner who was not yet a Baha'i, met, and immediately something clicked between them spiritually. And Enoch just held out his arms to envelop this Afrikaner young man, and Don just melted into Enoch's arms, and it was at that moment, Don told me later, that he felt as though, yes, this is true, I must become a Baha'i. He was the first Afrikaner male to become a Baha'i. Sue Hofmeyr, by the way, was the first woman believer of Afrikaans background to become a Baha'i. And he then became a very, very active teacher all over, amongst the blacks, the coloreds, the Indians, the Malays, and his own Afrikaner people in the country. And who knows what kind of a spiritual influence this has had upon the fall of apartheid in South Africa.
The passing away of Hand of the Coast and Olinga was a big blow to all of us, but as time went by, the fruits of his work, the fruits of what he was doing in Kenya and also in our neighboring country, Uganda, could begin to be seen. And all of us feel very proud and very happy, really, that he left us such knowledge. Today, the faith has grown even much bigger, and the communities in Kenya have grown much stronger.
One time, one Hand of the Coast is, I'm telling his love, he came again and collected me. You know, I was single, I had not got married, I was a youth, a national secretary who was young. So he came, Wafula, I'm taking you to my home. After welcoming me, he said to Mr. Wafula, now I'm going to cook. I will not let Madam Elizabeth to cook. I'm going to cook now, supper. And I remember the supper he cooked. It was fish. It was fish that he fried so beautifully, so nicely. And Mr. Olinga is a wonderful cook, I'm telling you. He's a wonderful cook. A cook. And Madam Elizabeth was there, and he cooked ugali very beautifully. And we put on the table, and you know, water we washed and we ate together. And then after that, then he prepared tea also. Yeah, he didn't let it. And he cooked tea and we had tea together. After that, then when it was getting, you know, around 10 p.m., he took me to the Baha'i Center where I used to stay. Imagine. And he taught me that was a lesson to me, because you know, in African tradition, when you are married as a husband, you are like a king. You just sit. You don't know where food is cooked in the kitchen. You don't even go to the kitchen. So your wife brings you food like a king, put on the table, and you eat. And that is a lesson I got from Hand of the Coast in Olinga, that we should share responsibilities in a house. And that is what I also do. Yeah. And what about if your wife gets sick and you are not used to cook? Yeah. So you should, you know, you should cook and so on. You should know, you know, the responsibilities in the kitchen, all of you, so that when this one is busy or is sick, you even washing clothes. Yeah, you can wash the clothes of your wife. In African tradition, also washing clothes of your wife is a taboo. But the Baha'is, you know, after learning from Hand of the Coast in Olinga, we should wash. Yeah, take the clothes and wash. Yeah, she takes yours, he washes, and so on and so on. So I learned this from the Hand of the Coast.
Enoch Olinga's noble spirit and love for Baha'u'llah can still be felt today around the world.
Welcome from Port of Spain in the Caribbean. This is Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Julian Rogers, and we're here to share the memories of Enoch Olinga, hand of the cause of the Baha'i faith. With me, Sabine Coward and her husband, Lawrence.
He visited Trinidad, and we were invited to meet him at a friend's home, Miss Shamsi Sedegat, an Iranian pioneer who was living in Couva. And we went, my husband and I. And when we got there, Shamsi came down with him, and he embraced my husband first, and then he embraced me. And there was this feeling of magnetism radiating from him, and it was as being absorbed into this ocean of love.
What was magical to me was when he embraced me, I recognized that my inner being, or some people may say your soul, my soul met with his soul, and we became one. We became an ocean of oneness. And you didn't want to let go of the man.
Well, we organized a meeting at our home, and we invited the Baha'is of the community and also non-Baha'is. And Sharon wrote a poem in his honor. And after having dinner, she read the poem, and he was very touched by it. And he took the poem and he said, Sharon would be she's special, and she would be very great one day. And today, Sharon is working with the CBU, and her voice is heard throughout the Caribbean and sometimes in America.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Olinga when he came in 1970. I don't remember too many details, but there's one experience that stands out in my mind. In addition to speaking to the public and giving very erudite and distinguished presentations, he went out to visit Baha'i communities in the various villages. He gave a presentation at City Hall, one of the most amazing presentations on reality I've ever heard anybody give.
But he was always a jolly man. And the first thing he asked you, are you happy? And he said, you must be happy at all times. If you're not happy this day, when you're going to be happy? And he goes on and talks to the people in Matura, in that area. He explained that Baha'u'llah was the eternal spirit of Christ. How could that be? So Mr. Olinga, his loving kindness way, how he did. And he always reminds us, he doesn't do anything unless that he feels the power of the Holy Spirit. He says, I don't make a move until I feel the power of the Holy Spirit. Because that's my guidance, and that we should all be that way.
He always seemed to be on another plane. You would talk to him and sort of drag him back into this place and he would talk back and forth with you, but then, you know, soon he would be back on this other level, and I was thinking, boy, it would be so nice to be able to travel with this man. After he stopped in St. Thomas and was going down to Barbados, I had the nice experience in that I was able to travel with him for 9 hours.
2 years ago, Frank and I took a trip through the islands doing interviews, getting some history from the early believers and some of the, you know, the pioneers and such. And everywhere we went, Julian, people still remembered him. Now, he only made 2 trips in our area, and yet the feeling, he really moved the people. There was a power in him, but yet a simplicity that people seem to feel. Our area, of course, having this special feeling for high-ranking officials, particularly in the faith, being from Africa, there was a really extensive schedule set out for him. He was to meet the heads of state, ministers of government, prominent people, and of course all of the media. Now, we're staying out in this tiny little village in Barbados, but I really wanted him to come and come there. And I finally got up the courage to ask him, and I said, well, do you suppose you could come out and, you know, talk at one of our meetings tonight? And he gives this you know, big sigh because he has this really cramped schedule. And he says, well, what's it like where you are? And I think, oh. Now I begin to look in space, and I'm thinking, what can I say to him? And finally I said, well, where you are now, where you're staying now, is like the city. Where I'm staying is like the country. And he breaks out in this big smile. He says, let's go. Okay. So he was very happy there.
Now, we were playing, had to be around 71. We were booked up in Harlem to the Club Baron, opposite Miles. Miles and Dizzy were playing opposite each other, the 2 quintets. And man, Enoch Olinga was here in the United States, and he came to the club to see Dizzy.
Olinga was so majestic. The people stood up and applauded for him and didn't even know who he was.
But I know Dizzy looked up to him like a hero. It was after we met him that Dizzy wrote the tune Olinga. One of the key mysteries of his concept has to do with something he used to refer to as the perfect offbeat. Now, if you play that tune, a musician plays that tune because of the way it's falling, where you're playing downbeats where upbeats would have went. It puts you into a flow of music that all of a sudden you're out in this place, man, and the tune does that. And I think it was more or less Dizzy giving a gift to musicians by writing a tune like that. The beginning of the tune, Olinga, is like a chant. It's like a chant. And you get this real calming experience just listening to it. And to hear all that big sea of people out there singing that was like, you know, like, make you have a chill, you know. Judy Rafat is a Baha'i, a singer, a very good singer, lives in Germany. And I got a call from Judy, and she wanted to do a tribute to Dizzy album. And they had approached me about writing the arrangements and actually producing it. But one of the tunes on it was Olinga.
In 1994, I had the opportunity to travel with a group of professional African-American women throughout southern Africa. On the way back, we traveled to Haifa, Israel, and had the opportunity of speaking with a man by the name of Ali Nachavani, a wonderful person, a wonderful and wise individual, who related a story about Enoch Olinga that I don't think any of us will ever forget. Enoch Olinga himself, a wonderful African man, himself great and wise, the story was about him being approached by a group of Muslims who asked him, could you speak to us a bit about what you know of tests and difficulties? And Enoch Olinga was rather taken by surprise. He didn't know what to say, so he contemplated, he meditated, and he was inspired by this particular story. And this is a story that Ali Nachavani told us. He said that, Enoch Olinga said that humanity was like an instrument. And that as instruments, all of us really had a longing desire to be played by this most great musician that everyone had heard about. And this yearning was within all of us. And he said, say you're a guitar, and this guitar yearns to be played by the most great musician, and finally one day the most great musician can hear the yearning of this guitar to be played. And so he picks it up gently, he holds it to his breast, because he knows how much this guitar longs to be played, and he attempts to play, but he has found that the guitar is out of tune because of non-use. But the great musician says, because I know how much this guitar longs to be played, I will tune it. And as he attempts to tune the first string, the string is brittle and does not yield to the tuning and breaks. And Enoch Olinga said, it is the tuning that is the tests and difficulties of life. He says, but the great musician says, but because I know this guitar wants so much to be played, I will play with 5 strings. And as he attempts to tune the 5th string, it too does not yield and breaks against the tuning. Until finally, all the strings have broken except one. And the great musician says, but because I know this instrument, this guitar, desires so much to be played, I will play with 1 string. And so he attempts to tune the last string, and it too breaks. And now there are no strings left, and the great musician holds the guitar in his hands, and he looks at it. And finally, he casts it aside and searches for another that has the same yearning. Well, when we heard that, we kept thinking, well, now, surely this isn't the end of the story. He's going to give it some more strings. He's going to make a drum out of but he's not going to cast it aside. And it was at that time that Ali Nachavani said to us that Enoch Olinga explained that no matter how much you desire to serve, no matter how much you gifted you are, no matter how much you yearn, no matter what you do, if you do not yield to the tests and difficulties of life, you will break against them. And then God cannot use you.
Even though I never had the privilege of meeting Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, there is one story that I've heard that I hope to share. I was at a meeting that was to discuss ways that the Institution of the Learned could assist communities in their growth and development. And so one of the counselors shared a story that talked about how Enoch Olinga would go, his method of teaching. He would go into a community and would quickly find a number of people who were attracted to the message and would declare their belief in Baha'u'llah. Mr. Olinga would teach in a community, and as soon as there were believers there, he would tell them that he would come and visit, and he would do this every few weeks. On his way there, he would bring refreshments, buy fruit at the market, and just would visit with their friends. They would begin by saying prayers and reading from the writings, and then he would ask them about their community life. and then he would invite everyone that was present to share in the refreshments. And this pattern went on for over a year, when finally one day, as they were discussing the things that were going on in the community, he introduced to them the concept, which you've all guessed, of the 19-day feast as this great blessing that Baha'u'llah had taught. And he praised them lavishly because he just said, you have already been doing these things, and I know that you can continue them, you have experienced them, and so forth.
I would like to liken the life of Mr. Olinga to a piece of iron. And instead of being the dark piece of metal which had just become warm, he became luminous because he acquired the qualities of the fire and became luminous. And this was a process which Shoghi Effendi explained to him when he was on pilgrimage. He told him that Baha'is go through 3 stages: attraction, conversion, and dedication. So here was a dedicated Enoch Olinga, that he had become so consecrated and dedicated through his service, through his teaching, you see, through his study, through his personal adherence to Baha'i law in his life. He flowed. He became that iron that flew as a result of the heat of the fire, this divine fire that Baha'u'llah had brought to the world. And that was the 4th stage. And he continued to be like this till the end of his life. He always gave of himself to the friends. When he taught with radiance, with joy. When he spoke to the friends, he also did the same. He spoke with faith. He spoke with conviction. He spoke with love. Because he was no more a believer. He was a lover. He was not only a lover, he was an intoxicated lover. That's what he was. And to many Baha'is that he has met, he was able to transmit this feeling of love for the cause. So through the circumstances of his life and through his personal effort, I would say his daily effort, and through the exercise of his own willpower, he was able to achieve so much in such a short time. He is truly an example to Baha'is everywhere, and more particularly to his fellow believers on the African continent. I loved him very much.
Hand of the Cause of God, Mr. Enoch Olinga.
We all know that Baha'u'llah is the promised one, is the awaited one of the nations of the world, is the King of Kings. As a Christian, I was born a Christian. My parents were Christians of the Church of England. We are always expecting the return of Christ. And we're being taught in our church every time. And at the time I was drawing nigh when Jesus returned to earth, there was a time when I ran into a young man, a brilliant young man from Persia, Ali Nakhtubani. It was really Ali who first told me about Baha'u'llah in Kampala, Uganda. And he told me that Baha'u'llah, among other things, had said that he was the promised one of all ages, the return of the divine or spiritual reality of the manifestations of the past. That included Jesus Christ. And that struck me very much. And I was keenly interested to find more. Then Ali told me that it was one of the Baha'i principles that each and every individual should investigate the truth for themselves. So I began to look into it. And the future of the African continent, or the African people, is bright. There's no doubt about that. But I might as well add that Baha'u'llah has come for the people of the world, for the tribes, the races, and the nations of the world, and not for one particular continent or tribe.
Right.
He has come to rebuild the world. Indeed, is the Lord of the world, the Lord of the universe. But I also remember it is, where it is said that the last shall be first, and first shall be last. And this is, I think, a favor, a bounty, a blessing from the blessed beauty of Baha'u'llah to the people of Africa. Africa is witnessing a great change, a spiritual revolution, we say. In Uganda, where I come from, there are thousands and thousands of believers in Baha'u'llah, and many local spiritual assemblies, and we have a Baha'i temple there. I can say that in a short while from now, there will be a real explosion in Africa, spiritually speaking, when thousands upon thousands will rush to the cause and embrace faith and become identified with the name of the greatest manifestation, Baha'u'llah. We are living in wonderful days, the days of the Lord of mankind. And as I believe very fervently, Baha'u'llah is the King of glory, the King of kings, the Lord of hosts. Aren't you proud to be a Baha'i?
Oh God, make me a hollow reed from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others. Oh God, make me a hollow reed from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others. Oh God, make me a hollow reed from which the